Can you offer a brief overview of why landscape architecture is moving towards BIM when it's something that started in the AEC industry?
Ultimately, I think landscape architects, they want to design the best possible solution for the site. And to do that, there really needs to be excellent communication amongst all the various disciplines. BIM gives the landscape architect the confidence that they can share their design intent with the consultants, the contractors, so ultimately there aren't any missing gaps.
The move for BIM for landscape architects has been something that we kind of saw coming. I think the landscape architects are seeing that there is a benefit to being in this smarter workflow, and it's really paying out for them to see that come to life.
So the most important part about the pre-design is understanding the existing site conditions. And a dedicated BIM process allows the landscape architect to more quickly understand the existing site conditions. Ultimately, what you're looking for are the constraints and the opportunities that are available on the site. And what I find most exciting about the landscape architect's role is it's really the first time everything comes together. You get to import survey files to understand the topography, the terrain, perform slope analysis, see the high and low elevations on the site, where's the water flowing and how do we need to treat it. You also can bring in arborist information for existing trees, and if you're using that in combination of data visualization, you can more quickly see which trees are critical that might be hazardous or which trees are invasive. So immediately you know which trees that you need to remove. If you're collaborating with an architect early on, you can also bring in early models of the buildings. So very quickly, the landscape architect can understand the constraints and the opportunities on the site.
So pre-design is interesting because I think most people don't really expect to involve their design software in a pre-design experience. Similar to the process of what we did when we went from hand drawing to a CAD workflow, you were doing the same things, but you were doing it in a different way. You had a different tactic. And this really feeds into the idea of what a BIM execution plan and a BIM implementation plan can do for a firm. So a BIM execution plan is one that a firm is going to work on collaboratively with everyone who's participating in the project besides themselves. The implementation plan is firm specific, so that firm understands as we approach each and every project, this will change a little bit based on what that project requires. And so each project gets its own BIM implementation plan to enable them to approach each project correctly and appropriately.
So schematic design is where landscape architects get to be their most creative. Does a BIM process, by its very nature, harm this creativity since it's so data heavy?
Absolutely not. I think it actually helps during the schematic design phase. The designer has all of the information out in front of them, so they can very quickly make better informed design decisions. The fact that you're able to collaborate with consultants on a completely different level, it allows you early on in the process to point out any concerns that might need to be addressed by the various consultants.
So coordination and collaboration are both vital and are central to even the very idea of BIM. So what kinds of files can Vectorworks Landmark import and export?
This is actually what I love about our development team. They understand our need to collaborate with various disciplines that might require different software. We have the ability of importing and exporting to Revit, DWG, which includes Civil 3D files. You have the ability of importing 3D file formats like SketchUp, Rhino, and then probably most importantly, the ability to import and export to IFC, which stands for Industry Foundation Classes. It's a non-proprietary file format that allows us to participate in open BIM. The beauty of Vectorworks Landmark is all of the smart objects, the plugin objects, whether it's the hardscape, the plant, the landscape area, all of these are automatically assigned an IFC designation or a P set. And you can specify however much data or however much detail you want when it goes out to IFC. And once you have that IFC file, you're able to exchange that with the various disciplines and the software that they're using.
Files can get pretty heavy on information. Does everything need to be modeled and documented for these construction documents to be considered complete?
You don't need to model every little piece of a project. Oftentimes you might want to use standard details, whether those are for your joints or your curbs. So you can make use of these standard details that you know perform well, and essentially use reference markers in your drawing sets to directly link to them so that everything is tied together. But you don't need to model every little piece.
But that also means that the more you detail in your BIM model, the more you get out of that file itself. The challenge I think you'll have is that you don't have to have every fastener or every attachment detailed. Just enough to be able to show what it needs to show for a client is as good as you really need it to be. When it needs to be used for clash detection, you need all the details you can.
In Vectorworks Landmark, 3 tools stand out as crucial for landscape architects. I'm thinking about the landscape area tool, the plant tool, and the hardscape tool. How might one use these in a BIM workflow?
So it's interesting because I'm going to start that approach with something that doesn't sound very BIM-ish, but I think it's really relevant to a lot of those in our industry who approach a start to doing BIM. You can actually start by creating shapes and forms from the very beginning, just like you did if you were doing other kind of preliminary or schematic design approaches. Those forms can quickly be turned into a BIM object, like a plant, like a landscape area, or like a hardscape. So the interesting thing is you can start from what you already know, and then once you've created a BIM object out of it, it doesn't have to carry a lot of data, but the data that it does carry can already start to benefit your workflow. All of those processes from an earlier state can still be informative, even if you haven't given a lot of data or a lot of parameters to those objects. So I think from that perspective, if you're using the right tools from the very beginning, you will eventually reap the benefits as you progress through each other design phase. So you might have a set of objects, even in your canned library, that you're going to pull from that have a certain amount of information associated to it. And you might decide as you're creating your project that you need to switch things out. There isn't a way of having to stop what you're doing and just restart the whole project. You can start like you always do and just shift gears and make that process work for you. So the ability to switch out elements. So let's say you had an ornamental tree and you decided it was going to be a crabapple. You might have another library object to switch out very quickly, and immediately it's a crabapple in your plan. So you can very quickly see those kind of things, and you continue to make progress more efficiently. So in construction documentation phase, I think that BIM certainly does allow us and enable us to be more efficient. But I think even beyond what we're doing within the construction documentation phase is that you're informing the project, you're informing the client. The client has a very smart model. They have a smart set of documents. Those continue to inform what's going on with the project even beyond the construction documentation phase. But it doesn't just benefit the construction document phase. After you have created the first one and the second one and the third one, makes the next process easier. So whether you're developing templates to make that process easier from a switch from schematic to design development to construction documents, or if you're just creating something that will become the placeholder for the next project, you're really building efficiencies that will extend beyond that specific project in CD level.